Dawn on the greasy grass came clear and windless, the kind of high plains morning where sound carries for miles. Smoke from hundreds of small fires drifted above cottonwoods along the Little Bighorn. Horses whickered in a long, rolling chorus. Women filled kettles at the river, boys pushed ponies to water. Old men braided rawhide in the shade and argued about the soldiers the scouts had seen the night before. This was a giant camp, Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho together, tens of hundreds of people living in a line of lodges that curved with the river. Children chased dogs through the dust. The sun climbed, then the first riders came shouting up the valley. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer had pushed the 7th Cavalry hard from the Rosebud after spotting a huge pony trail. He refused to wait for General Terry and Colonel Gibbon closing from the north. Delay, he believed, would let the non-treaty bands scatter. Custer had made his name by moving first and fast. He carried that habit into a valley where it fit nothing he thought he knew. Near noon, Crow and Arikara scouts brought him to a ridge with a view of the valley. They pointed at the dust and the countless ponies, at teepees strung like shells along the water. They said it was the largest village they had ever seen. Custer decided it was a village surprised and a village that would run. He split his regiment into 4 parts. Major Marcus Reno would take 3 companies to strike the south end. Captain Frederick Benteen would scout left and keep pressure. The pack train would follow with ammunition. Custer himself would swing wide with 5 companies and hit the far side. The orders were quick, some of them carried by scribbled notes shoved into couriers' hands. The country between units was broken, and the clock unforgiving. Reno splashed across around noon and formed a skirmish line in waist-high grass. Warriors poured from the village first by handfuls, then in waves. Firing from cover in the cottonwoods, Cheyenne and Lakota riders slipped around the flanks and began to close. Reno ordered a fighting withdrawal to the timber, then, losing nerve, a mount and charge for the bluffs. The line collapsed into a panic. Men died in the thickets and in the water. Reno reached the heights with fragments of his command and a shock that would never leave him. Benteen, moving on a confusing set of orders and broken country, reached Reno instead of Custer. He found a shaken command and a rising number of wounded. Dust to the north showed heavy fighting, but the pack train had just arrived, and his own men were dry. He chose to hold with Reno on a knob that would become Reno Hill, filling canteens under fire, while sharpshooters sniped from the draws. What happened to Custer's 5 companies was already underway, beyond the folds of gray earth and sage. Guided along a high spine, loose, then nigh Cartwright ridges, Custer watched the northern end of the village. He may have believed Reno's attack would pin the camp long enough for a decisive strike from above. Instead, warriors disengaged from Reno and raced up the valley. Gall and Crow King gathered Hunkpapa and Oglala groups. Two Moon and Lame White Man brought Cheyenne. Crazy Horse led a fast wedge through the coulees. The village did not run. It rose. Custer's first push toward the river at Medicine Tail Coulee stalled. Carbine fire from the bluffs and a rush of mounted warriors forced his men back to higher ground. From there, he tried to move northwest along linked ridges toward what he thought might be a softer crossing. The terrain broke his command into knots, separated by swales and shallow ravines. Warriors on quick ponies flowed between those knots, firing at close range, then wheeling away to hit another pocket. The soldiers' Springfields were accurate but slow to reload, many jammed with fouled extractors. Men who stopped to clear them were suddenly alone. On Calhoun Hill, Captain Miles Keogh anchored a line that fought like a hinge holding a door against a wind it could not stop. Cartridge piles found later show heavy, disciplined fire. Then the flank folded, perhaps when Crazy Horse's fighters broke through low ground at the rear. Horses went down, men tumbled into each other, Cheyenne accounts tell of soldiers shooting their own mounts for breastworks as the circle tightened. Farther north, Custer's headquarters and 2 companies concentrated on a low rise, later called Last Stand Hill. Bodies lay in clusters, suggesting small groups firing back to back as the ring shrank. Some troopers ran for the river and fell in the swales. White Cow Bull told of shooting a rider in a buckskin coat at a crossing. Other accounts put Custer on the hilltop. When the firing stopped, perhaps an hour after first contact, the grass was pocked with lead, and the noise fell to wind and flies. Back on the bluffs, the combined command on Reno Hill endured a siege through evening and into the next day. Warriors ringed the position at rifle range, sniping from every fold. Wounded men begged for water. Volunteers crawled to the river with canteens and crawled back, shot through. A surgeon moved down a line with a small kit and carbolic. By mid-morning on the 26th, the warriors faded. Scouts announced soldiers approaching from the north. Terry and Gibbon arrived to a field already decided. The battle grew from policy. After gold was found in the Black Hills, the government pressed the Lakota to cede the land, then ordered all non-treaty bands to agencies by a winter deadline that ignored hunting and snow. The army moved to compel. Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, and others gathered people who would not give up the old grounds. In June, Crook was checked on the Rosebud. A week later, Custer rode ahead of his support into the Little Bighorn. Aftermath did what aftermath does. Washington sought blame, first Reno and Benteen for failing to ride to Custer, then no one in particular. A court of inquiry produced more heat than light. Newspapers printed heroics and invented speeches. Buffalo Bill staged Last Stand Hill for paying crowds. Lakota and Cheyenne families kept other memories. Panic at the river, boys in blue no older than theirs, the way victory brought more soldiers, not less. The Army returned with winter campaigns and agency pressure that fractured the very unity that had stood on that ridge. Walk the ridges now, and the distances settle into view. Wind hums through sage. Meadowlarks drop notes like water. White marble headstones mark where bodies were found. Farther back, the shallow rifle pits on Reno Hill still show in the dirt. Down in the broad valley, the river moves as it did that morning when women drew water and the lodges stretched for a mile. The ground tells a plain story if you let it. A commander who divided against a larger enemy, men who fought well for one another once the choices narrowed, and a village that answered invasion with unity and speed. Custer's name fills shelves. The names of the men with him are carved in stone. Beside them stand markers for Lakota and Cheyenne, dead whose families kept accounts without marble. Every June the heat lies on the hills the same way, the grass rattles the same, and riders appear again in the mind. Blue blouses dark with sweat, paint-smeared ponies running low, a buckskin coat turning as a trumpet sounds too late. It ended quickly on that ridge, but the echo traveled far, through policy and show business and school books, through reservation lines and broken promises, through the long argument over who gets to write the story of that day. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.